Hello, and welcome to this brief webinar on the steps for completing the postseason registration form for 2017-18 indoor bocce. And just a quick reminder, the postseason registration form is actually the form that's used as the official roster for all postseason tournament play, to include the respective district tournaments that will be taking place. And then, of course, for those teams that have the great opportunity to advance and participate in our state tournament. So again, this form is used as the official roster for all postseason play. So this is just a brief webinar on how to properly complete the form. So please follow along. And what I've done is I've created a kind of quick guide here that you're looking at now. Sorry, now you should be able to see it, if not before, where I've broken how to fill out the postseason registration form down into 5 simple steps. And I just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page on how to correctly do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my screen actually to the form itself, but you will receive this these sets of 5 steps as an attachment as well. So without further ado, moving on to the actual form. So the first step is accessing the form, and what we're asking is that you download the form as a Microsoft Excel document. So whether you're accessing it through the coach's resource guide that we have given you access to via the Google Drive, where you can find a form, or whether you're accessing it through an attachment as an email, we're asking that you download it as a Microsoft Excel document in order to submit it, and not use the Google Drive. As you know, that Google Drive form is a shared document. So if you were to use that, everybody's form will look like yours. So again, download it as a Microsoft Excel document and navigate it through there. Secondly, if your school has more than one team, you need to have a separate file for each team. As you know, in Microsoft Word, in a single workbook, you have the option there at the bottom to have multiple sheets. And a common practice in the past would be for coaches to create one file for their school and then have a separate sheet for each team. That presents a bit of a challenge on Special Olympics end when it comes to us organizing and printing and doing different things that we have to do. So we now require you to have multiple files, multiple workbooks for each team if your school has more than one team. So do not create one file and then use the sheets at the bottom for multiple teams. Moving on, of course, we will need you to fill out all of the information at the top. So where it says high school and the cell adjacent to that, the full name of your high school, the full name of the head coach, the county where your high school is, and then the cell phone number of the head coach. Believe it or not, in the past, coaches have left some of this information off, and we need all of this information on the form for it to be considered to be correctly filled out in full. And going back to the multiple teams, here where you put your high school, I'll use WISE. If your school only has one team, then you can just put the name of the school and that's it. But if your school has more than one team, we're asking that you designate each team with the word team and then a number, of course, starting with 1. So whether that's team 1 or team 2, we're asking that you designate on each different file the team number. In the past, another thing that coaches have done is to designate each team using one of the school's colors or some type of mascot or a variation of the mascot. So we are requiring you or asking you not to do that. So the only designations and distinctions you should be making between multiple teams of one school is by team number, team 1, team 2, team 3, so on and so forth, not Wise High School team blue or Wise High School team yellow. So once you have all of that information filled out, then you can move down to where your players' names will go. So under player name, that first box you see is an example that we provided. Please leave that example there. It will not, being there will not affect your team's total score or total average, but because of the way the document is formatted, erasing it may. So please leave that example there and just use it to your benefit. But here, and I'll use my name, you'll put your player's name, and then in the box adjacent, using the drop down option, you'll designate the role of that player, whether he or she is an athlete or a unified partner. And then, of course, during your team assessments, presumably you've already handwritten the scores, and you'll just be transferring the scores over to this digital format. But here's where you will put the score or the measurement of a particular player. Oops. And as you can see over to the right, the total is being calculated for you, so you will not have to go through and do the math on that. So for Brian Montgomery, that's your first player. You designated Brian as a unified partner. You put all 9 of his measurements in, and then in that total column, it actually calculated it for you, a total of 450. So what you would do is you would go through and you would do this for each player. And if you see at the bottom also, it's calculating the team's total score and the team's average score as you go along. So please remember to put the player's first name and last name, no initials. Please remember to designate whether the player is an athlete or a unified partner. Please have and submit a score for each trial for a total of 9 trials. And again, the total column will calculate for you. One thing to remember when doing a postseason registration form, the only time a team can and should have any substitute players is if in the normal playing lineup there are 8 players listed already. So this whole section must be filled out with different players in order for you to have any substitutes. And that note is down at the bottom too. The very last sentence, substitutes may only be designated for teams consisting of 8 players. So what that means is if your team has less than 8 players, then all 4 to 7 players, 4 being the minimum, must be designated in their normal playing lineup, and that team that has less than 8 players shall not have any substitute players listed. So you can't have 4 players here and then 2 subs. That's a total of 6. All 6 players in that scenario would need to be listed in the normal playing lineup. So the next, and this is probably the most important step, is for any players or any, I should say, roster spots that are empty. So say we had a player here, and I'll just use player 2 for the sake of time, player 3, and player 4. So this meets the minimum. Say this team only has 4 players. So on this particular form, this team of 4 players, this form is left with 4 empty roster spots in the normal playing lineup, and then 2 empty roster spots in the substitute section. Once you filled out the scores or the measurements for each player that is listed, then it is absolutely vital for you to go in and erase or delete all zeros for empty roster spots. So row number 14, that's our first empty roster spot. If I was a coach going in correctly filling this out, I would go to this 0 and I would erase it. And if you notice at the bottom, the average is changing as the zeros are erased. So what happens is if you do not complete that step, if you leave zeros in for empty roster spots, then it's going to result in yielding an inaccurate average, because what it will do is it will account for those roster spots. Even if there's no name here, if there's a 0 here, then the algorithm will automatically account for that being a roster spot. And of course, as you know, a 0 will give you an inaccurate score. Please remember to only erase the zeros once all measurements have been inputted for the players that you do have on your roster. Again, input every player and every player's measurement on the postseason registration form first, and then for any empty roster spots that you have, go in and delete the zeros. And then finally, when you're saving the documents, it's very important this year that you use a specific naming structure. And I'll just go here to show you. So I'm down at step 5, where it says save the file using the following specific naming structure. So once you're finished completing your document and you're ready to save it before sending it off to your district representative, when you hit save as and you're naming the file, we're asking that all coaches use the provided naming structure. It provides for us to have a great deal of efficiency and uniformity on our end and consistency. So what we want for you to do is to use the 2-letter county abbreviation associated with your school, underscore the name of the school, and then, if applicable, the team number. So I'll use WISE, for example. WISE is in Prince George's County. So if I was a coach naming my team in the Microsoft Excel document and WISE only had one team, I will put PG, that's the 2-letter county abbreviation, underscore WISE, and then HS representing high school, and then hit save, and that's it. In the case that a school has multiple teams, you will follow the same format, except for after the high school, you will put another underscore and then the designated team number. So there should be uniformity and consistency, across the board when naming, naming your schools. So again, this list of steps will be provided for you as an attachment as well. And then one more look at the postseason registration form, just to quickly reiterate. Please make sure all of the information at the top is filled out completely. Make sure all of the information, first and last name of all players, are listed under player name. Designate the player's role. Make sure all 9 measurements are in. You can leave the example of Joe Smith there in the total column. You do not have to calculate. It'll calculate for you. Once you have all players inputted and all of their measurements entered onto the form, then you can go in and for any empty roster spots that you have, you will come over to the total column and delete the zeros. Each roster has to be a minimum of 4 players. It can be a maximum of 8 players in the playing lineup, and for rosters with a maximum of 8 players, those teams can have 2 subs, one of each role designated there. And if your team does not have 8 players, then each of those players on your team should be listed in the normal playing lineup. So thank you for taking the time to view hopefully what was a quick webinar. I hope that everything was clear and with 100% clarity. If not, please reach out to your district representatives, and district representatives, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. And I look forward to an ongoing successful season, and then successful and exciting postseason tournament play. Thank you.